Lyft says it will not require employees to return back to the office until 2023 at the earliest. Balancing working remotely versus in the office is a fine line that a lot of companies are facing. Joining us to talk more about this, Lars Schmidt, the founder of AMPLIFY and the author of Redefining HR. Good morning, and thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
It is really crazy when we heard this news about Lyft saying 2023, realizing we're still in 2021. How did you feel when you heard the news?
Yeah, it didn't surprise me, and they're not alone. I think I've been doing a running list of companies that are pushing back start dates from Ford, Lyft, Uber, Apple, Google, Meta, Facebook. Many companies who had originally committed to January return to workplace plans are actually pushing that back. And this isn't the first time that happened. The same thing happened actually this summer with Delta and vaccination rates. I think a lot of companies were originally hoping to get back, workers back in the office at scale in September, and then Delta threw that for a wrench. So history is kind of repeating itself now.
Do you think it's a good move?
Do I think it's a bit what? I'm sorry?
Do you think this is a good move to push back the date, whether it's 2023 or maybe a few months?
Yeah, I do. I mean, look, I think the reality is if you look at some of the data, Gallup had a poll recently that 91% of employees who are working remotely now want to continue working remotely, at least partially, indefinitely. And 45% of full-time office workers are working at least partially or fully remote now. And so I think with all the uncertainty that remains around, Omicron and everything else, if employees are not comfortable coming back into the office, I think it's smart for companies to be pushing this back and just wait until we have a little clearer picture of what's happening, because we don't yet know if that's going to be a broader issue. And so having a bit of time to learn more makes sense.
Why do you think there is such a push for companies to get workers back in the office if you have data like that shows a lot of people are cool being at home?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that there's a lot of companies that, they've invested a lot in real estate. They feel that, culture happens in an office, connections happen in the office, innovation happens in an office, which we've kind of proven already not to be true over the last 2 years. But I think a lot of companies, still believe that. And so there's a desire to get people back into an office. But it's kind of incongruent with employees and their, desires and wishes and needs right now, which a lot of the data shows they want to be. And again, some employees want to go back to an office, but many employees want to have that flexibility. And ultimately, I think flexibility is what wins in this environment.
Do you think that our landscape, because of that, has changed permanently?
I do. I think for, people that have hopes and dreams of going back to a world of work that existed in February of 2020, that doesn't exist anymore. I think that many companies have already made commitments, longer-term commitments, to either being fully distributed or hybrid. And I think there are some workers who will never go back into an office. They've made changes, they've moved, they've made different lifestyle priorities. And so for them, the idea of commuting into an office 5 days a week, and having that be mandatory is just a way of working that they will never go back to.
So how do you think employers will kind of approach things going forward, not only with the sentiment that a lot of workers have in this permanently changing landscape, but just with the uncertainty of what's going on with these different variants? Do you think it's just kind of like risk management at this point?
I mean, it's definitely risk management. And I think the companies that are, more flexible and loose around these timelines are actually going to have happier employees. Because again, as I mentioned, last year we went through this dance before with Delta. And so, that's really disruptive for families when you're having to make plans. Maybe you have childcare, maybe you're a caretaker of parents, you have different circumstances. And if you now have one of your partners who's having to go back into an office, either fully or part-time, that has a big impact on that. And so there's a lot of planning that goes into being able to do that. And then when that date now changes, you have to kind of redo all those plans. And so I think companies, in particular, like, Google and Uber, who've kind of pushed this back somewhat indefinitely, or even Lyft, who said, let's just take another year to wait and see what happens. I think that's smart, because you're not putting your employees in that whiplash position of having to make those plans and then change those plans, where these announcements are coming out in, early to mid-December, and they were around January plans. So now companies have a couple of weeks during the holidays to scramble and adjust.
Lars, thank you so much. This is a big topic, a lot of different perspectives to weigh, so thank you so much for this.
Yeah, thanks for having me.